He ripped my uniform open right there on the courthouse steps like I was trash. Like the years I bled for this country meant nothing. He said I didn't deserve it, that I was just another old man in a chair. But he didn't know who I was. He didn't know that I had survived a war overseas, and I was about to start another one right here in Greystone. They tried to humiliate me, bury the truth, silence the history stitched into every thread of that jacket. But they forgot one thing. This isn't just a story about a black veteran in a wheelchair. It's a story about a nation forced to remember what it dared to forget. And this time, we watched. He tore my uniform open in front of everyone. Just like that. No warning, no decency, just rage in his eyes and disdain in his voice. "You don't deserve to wear this," he spat, yanking at the threadbare fabric that had once been my pride. My name patch hit the sidewalk like a piece of trash. And the worst part wasn't the tearing sound. It wasn't the gasps from bystanders or even the smirk of his partner as he leaned on the squad car. No, the worst part was the silence from the people I'd once sworn to protect faces I didn't recognize anymore. Watching a man get humiliated for simply existing. I stood frozen, chest bare breath shaking. Not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in decades, I felt like I didn't belong in the country I'd nearly died for. My name is Raymond Holt. I'm a 68-year-old black veteran, once a sergeant in the 2nd Marine Division, now just a man in a wheelchair who minds his business in a quiet corner of Greystone, Louisiana. I live in a 2-bedroom bungalow off Locust Drive. My days are simple morning coffee, reading the local paper, tending my garden when my back allows it. People wave at me, some even thank me for my service. But I know most of them don't really see me. Not until something happens. Not until someone in a badge decides that uniform doesn't suit my skin. What happened that morning at the courthouse steps wasn't the beginning. It was the breaking point. And every story has a spark. Mine came in the form of a parking space. A week before the incident, I'd rolled into City Hall to speak with a council member about funding for the Veterans Shelter downtown. The spot marked Veterans Only had been painted over, replaced with a new sign, Authorized Personnel. I asked the receptionist why. She shrugged, said the chief of police had updated the protocol. I left without a meeting, but with something burning in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just disbelief. Officer Kincaid was his name. Late 30s, white muscular, always seen with aviator glasses even when it rained. He was the one they sent to explain the new rules. But his tone wasn't informative. It was commanding. "If you don't like how we do things now, sir," he said, putting weight on that last word, "you're free to file a complaint." He smiled as he said it like he knew what that paper would do nothing. At first, I tried to let it go. I'd faced worse. Much worse. Jungle firefights in Da Nang, racism in the 70s, a grenade that took half my hearing and my ability to walk. This was nothing. Just a man with a badge and a chip on his shoulder. But then I saw him again. At the local grocery, patting down a young black boy for suspicious behavior. The boy had a toy truck in his pocket. He was 6. I started recording. Kincaid noticed. He walked over, said I was interfering. I said I was documenting. He said I was resisting. I said I'd fought for his right to wear that badge. He said, "Well, maybe you should have fought harder, old man." That moment played in my head every night after. Until the day he found me outside City Hall again. This time, I was wearing my faded Marine dress blues. I'd come for a photo with a few local vets. But Kincaid stepped in front of the camera. "You wearing that for attention?" he asked. I told him I wore it to remind people what dignity looked like. That's when he did it. That's when he grabbed my lapel, tore the uniform open like it was a joke, and left me there shirtless, broken, exposed. I wish I could say someone helped me up. That a passerby put a hand on my shoulder. But they didn't. People just stared. Phones recorded. A few whispered. But no one moved. Not until I did. I picked up my name tag, placed it on my lap, and rolled away. But that was just the beginning, because that night I didn't cry. I made a plan. When I got home that evening, I stared at myself in the mirror longer than I ever had in my life. The torn fabric still clung to me like a wound, the threads frayed around the chest where my insignia used to be. My name, Raymond Holt, was embroidered crooked now, hanging by a single stitch. I reached up and touched it with fingers that used to grip a rifle steady in the thick fog of combat, and now trembled with something heavier than shame. I live alone. My wife Denise passed away 10 years ago. Cancer. She used to iron that uniform every Memorial Day, every Veterans Day, every time I had a school visit to talk to kids about duty honor sacrifice. She loved how it looked on me. Said I stood taller in it, even sitting down. And now, here it was mutilated by someone who couldn't see past the melanin in my skin. Someone who had never served. Someone who thought authority meant cruelty. The house was quiet, save for the low hum of the old refrigerator. I wheeled into the living room, flipped open my laptop, and clicked into a folder I hadn't touched in years. Deployment. 1972. Inside were scanned letters, discharge papers, commendations, and photos me in the jungle with my squad holding a flag. I scrolled through until I found one in particular, me saluting legs, still whole eyes, fierce with purpose. I stared at it for a long time. That young man had no idea that one day he'd be mocked in front of a courthouse for daring to wear what he'd bled for. I didn't post the video that night. I didn't even re-watch it. Instead, I typed up a letter. Not to Officer Kincaid. Not to the Greystone Police Department. But to the local VFW, to the American Legion, to 3 council members I knew by name, and one I didn't trust. I told them everything what he said, what he did, how he looked at me like I was less than nothing. I ended the letter with 3 words, "This cannot stand." I clicked send, and then I waited. 3 days passed, nothing, then a 4th. That's when I got a call, from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was thin young. "Mr. Holt," he said. "My name is Ethan. I saw what happened. I was there. I recorded it too." He sent me the video. It was worse than I remembered. In Ethan's footage, the sound was clearer. You could hear Kincaid's words. "You think this makes you a hero? You're just another leech in a uniform." Then the ripping sound. My startled breath, the collective gasp, a woman's voice saying, "Oh my God." Then silence. Long, awkward, cowardly silence. I uploaded it to Facebook. Just one caption. "Is this how we treat our veterans now?" It went viral overnight. By morning, my inbox was full messages from strangers, from old Marines I hadn't spoken to in decades. From mothers, teachers, even a few police officers who said, "This isn't who we are," but Greystone's PD. They stayed silent until the press showed up. Local Channel 4 knocked on my door with a camera crew. I didn't want fame. I wanted justice. I sat in my living room beneath Denise's portrait and told them everything. The anchor, a black woman named Tamika, asked me if I forgave Officer Kincaid. I looked straight into the camera. "I don't want his apology," I said. "I want his badge." The story ran that evening. Then it hit the national feed. Then CNN. Then Twitter. Hashtag after hashtag chatter nas justice for Holt. Veteran dignity. Not your badge. But Greystone PD still nothing. Then came the protest. I didn't organize it. I just heard the noise one afternoon chanting car horns, the deep hum of a community waking up. I rolled to the edge of my porch, and there they were, 200 people standing on Locust Drive, holding signs. Veterans deserve respect. Protect, not humiliate. We stand with Sergeant Holt. Some brought American flags. Some wore fatigues. Some brought their kids. One little boy, maybe 7, stood on his father's shoulders holding a sign that simply read, "Would you rip my grandpa's uniform too?" I cried. For the first time since Denise passed, I truly cried. But I didn't cry for the pain. I cried because I wasn't alone. That night the mayor called. A woman named June Merriman. I'd voted for her once. She hadn't said a word when the video came out, but now her tone was nervous. "We're conducting an internal review," she said. "You're late," I replied. "We'd like to offer a public statement." "I'll give one too," I said. She paused. "Are you threatening a lawsuit, Mr. Holt?" "No, Mayor," I said. "I'm offering you a second chance." She hung up. By sunrise, the city issued a statement. "We are aware of the troubling incident involving Officer Kincaid and retired Marine Sergeant Raymond Holt. We are initiating a full investigation. The officer has been placed on administrative leave. Too little, too late, and too rehearsed. But I wasn't done, because while the city played politics, I made another call this time to someone I hadn't spoken to in 30 years. His name was Franklin Ross, my old squad mate, now a JAG lawyer, and still fierce as hell. "Ray," he said, voice gruff as ever. "Tell me everything." I did, and when I was finished he said just one word. Good, because now the fight was legal, and I was just getting started. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Not the temperature, though the air conditioning bit through my thin suit, but the atmosphere. Eyes everywhere. Press in the back. A dozen locals in the gallery. Some I recognized from the grocery store. Others had never said a word to me before in their lives. Now they came to see what would happen to the old, crippled Marine who dared to challenge the badge. Franklin Ross sat beside me, tall, broad black, wearing a dark blue suit that looked like it cost more than my entire year of disability checks. His beard was gray now, but his eyes were sharp like back in Nam when we took turns holding the line while the medevac came through. He hadn't lost an inch of his edge. He leaned in and whispered, "They're going to try to settle this. Don't flinch." Across the aisle sat Officer Kincaid, smirking, wearing a clean-pressed uniform. His badge gleamed, not a scratch on it. He didn't look at me, but I could feel the contempt radiating from his seat. His lawyer, a young white man with slicked-back hair and a look of permanent arrogance, shuffled papers like he was prepping for Broadway Not Justice. Judge Rosen entered. Gavel down. Case called. I'd never been in a courtroom as a plaintiff, only as a speaker years ago for veterans' rights panels. But now I was Exhibit A, living proof of what systemic arrogance looks like when it rips at flesh and fabric without consequence. Franklin spoke first. Calm, composed, but fire beneath every word. Sergeant Holt is not suing for money. He's not asking for a statue or a street name. He wants dignity. He wants recognition that what happened to him ripping his uniform in front of City Hall in front of dozens of witnesses for no lawful reason was not only a moral disgrace but a violation of the constitutional rights of a veteran who has served this country with honor. Kincaid's lawyer stood. Your Honor, the video lacks context. My client acted under stress. There was provocation insults, hurled interference with official duties. I didn't touch him. I said loud enough to silence the whole room. I didn't raise my hand or my voice. All I did was wear the wrong skin under the right uniform. There was a murmur behind me. Judge Rosen banged his gavel again. Order. But the seed was planted. The court recessed for lunch. Franklin and I sat beneath the rotunda alone. I held a paper cup of coffee with 2 hands to keep from shaking. I wasn't afraid of losing. I was afraid of being erased again, of being told once more that what happened didn't matter. Franklin tapped his phone. Press wants a statement. Tell them I'm tired of bleeding for a flag that doesn't bleed back. He smiled grimly. That'll do. By afternoon, things shifted. The city attorney, someone I didn't even know was involved, approached Franklin in the hallway with an offer. We'd like to issue a public apology, full reinstatement of all veteran honors, plus a donation to the local VFW in Mr. Holt's name. In exchange for withdrawing the civil suit. Franklin turned to me. I looked at the lawyer and said, "You forgot one thing." The man blinked. "What's that?" "His badge. Kincaid. I wanted that badge off his chest like a parasite pulled from clean skin. I didn't want him fired for revenge. I wanted him removed so that no other man like me, old, brown, quiet, would be humiliated by a man who mistook a gun for character. When the trial resumed, Franklin played the video on the courtroom screen. There I was in full uniform, wheeling up the courthouse steps. There was Kincaid stepping in front of me, making his comment. The sound of fabric ripping echoed through the room like a gunshot. And then a moment I'd missed when it happened live, a woman's voice off camera said, "That's Sergeant Holt. He spoke at my daughter's school. He's a hero." The courtroom was dead silent. Kincaid shifted in his seat. Franklin turned to the judge. "No further evidence, Your Honor. The video speaks louder than any law book. When the defense rose, they tried to paint me as emotional, as reactive, as unstable from years of trauma. But then Franklin did something bold. He called a surprise witness, the woman from the video. Her name was Lisa Nguyen, schoolteacher, immigrant, American citizen. She stood straight, hands clasped, and told the court Sergeant Holt taught my kids that this country was worth fighting for. That courage isn't about guns, but about standing up when no one else will. My son joined the ROTC because of him. What Officer Kincaid did wasn't just assault. It was erasure. Her words cracked something open. In the judge, in the gallery, in me. By the time she sat down, even Kincaid looked like he wanted to disappear into his pressed sleeves. The judge called a recess before delivering his ruling. It was protocol, but I think he needed time. Time to sit with the weight of what he'd just seen. I wheeled outside to get air, and there, on the courthouse steps where it all began, stood 30 men in uniform, some old, some young. Black, brown, white limping, walking in chairs like mine. And every single one of them saluted me as I came down, not because I was famous now, but because they knew what it meant to have your dignity stolen, and they knew I hadn't let them keep it. The gavel struck once, hard, sharp, like the crack of a rifle at dawn. Judge Rosen returned to the bench 30 minutes later, his face unreadable, his voice steady, but you could feel the tremor beneath his words like a fault line waiting to rupture. This court finds the actions of Officer Daniel Kincaid to be not only unprofessional, but disgraceful to the ideals this city claims to uphold. This was not an issue of policy nor miscommunication. This was a violation of civil dignity, a targeted attack on a man who has given more to this country than most of us ever will. Sergeant Raymond Holt, you were wronged. I didn't move. Not yet. I waited. The judge continued. Effective immediately. Officer Kincaid is stripped of badge and title. This ruling will be forwarded to the Department of Justice for review of civil rights violations. Furthermore, the City of Greystone is ordered to issue a formal televised apology and to establish an annual Veterans Honor Day in Sergeant Holt's name. Gasps, murmurs, one camera flash, then another. Kincaid stood up abruptly. You're going to ruin my life over one old man in a chair. Judge Rosen raised his eyes cold and clear. You ruined your own life, officer. And just like that, the badge came off. The courtroom erupted, not with cheers, not yet, but with movement. Quiet, reverent, heavy, like the march of memory. I didn't look at Kincaid as he stormed out. I didn't need to. That chapter was over, but the battle wasn't. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Bigger now. 100, 200, maybe more. Some held signs, some held flags. Some held photos of family in uniform, grandfathers, brothers, daughters, sons. It was a sea of faces wounded and waiting. Mayor June Merriman stepped onto the podium first. Her eyes scanned the crowd like a student who hadn't done her homework. She cleared her throat. Today, she began, we acknowledge a failure. No, a betrayal of one of our own. Sergeant Raymond Holt. I stopped her, rolled forward. You don't get to speak for me, I said, voice low but amplified by the weight of the moment. She stepped back. I turned to the crowd. I didn't ask to become a symbol. I didn't want to be the face of outrage. I just wanted to be a man who served and came home. That's all. But when you live in a country that forgets its own silence is betrayal. So today I speak not for myself, but for every veteran who's been ignored, every elder who's been dismissed, every black man who's been told his service isn't enough to earn respect. People began to clap. I kept going. This uniform, I said, holding up the torn sleeve Franklin had framed for me, isn't made of fabric. It's made of history, sweat, blood, and memory. You rip it, you tear through all of us, and we will not stay quiet anymore. The applause rose now. Not polite, not obligatory. It was thunder. It was release. Someone placed a hand on my shoulder. I turned Lisa Nguyen. She nodded through tears. You gave us courage. And then another touch. A teenager. A boy in a junior ROTC jacket. His hands trembled as he saluted me. For my dad, he whispered. He didn't get justice, but you did. Franklin stepped beside me, tall and proud, as camera drones buzzed overhead. That night, the city broadcast its apology. But the real apology wasn't words on a screen. It was action. 3 days later, the City Council passed Holt Day, an official recognition of all veterans with educational funding, therapy outreach, and public service protections. They didn't do it out of guilt. They did it because they had no other choice. They'd seen the storm coming, and the storm had a face now. Mine. Still, I couldn't rest, because something still bothered me. One evening, I received a letter unsigned. Inside a photo. A close-up of my ripped uniform. And beneath it, a typed sentence. There are more like him, wearing badges, waiting. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because I was awake in a way I hadn't been for decades. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was a war of memory against amnesia, and I wasn't about to retreat. They say, when one man stands, others find the strength to rise. But they never talk about what happens after when the cameras leave, the noise fades, and you're left staring into the quiet. waiting for the next hit to come. And it always comes. Not loud, not in the open, but in whispers, in shadows, in the cold hum of a system built not to correct but to conceal. It was 2 weeks after the verdict when the letters started. No return address, no signature, just folded pieces of paper slipped under my door or stuffed into my mailbox with no postage. The first one said, "You humiliated a good man." The second, "That badge meant more than your story ever will." The third, just a torn newspaper article of Kincaid in uniform circled in red ink with the words, "Still proud." I showed Franklin. He narrowed his eyes, said, "These aren't threats. These are warnings. Someone's afraid." He leaned back, thinking. This isn't just about one cop, Ray. This is about what you've exposed. That badge was a mask. You tore it off, and now the rest of them are scrambling. We did some digging. Turns out Kincaid had a history. 3 formal complaints. Excessive force. Verbal abuse. All dismissed. One from a single mother who said he slammed her teenage son's head into the hood of a car during a traffic stop. No charges. No investigation. Another was from a veteran like me who died of a heart attack 2 years ago before the case was reviewed. Buried, forgotten. Until now, Franklin filed for records. Redacted pages. Names missing. Witnesses unavailable. But something bigger was hiding in plain sight, a secret database maintained by the Greystone PD Internal Watch List. Category B. We found a back door through a whistleblower Franklin knew from D.C. What we saw chilled us. Over 40 names. Marked hostile. Most were black. Many were veterans. Some had lost access to city services, denied permits, harassed for minor violations, had their disability paperwork mysteriously delayed. And next to my name, newly added, was a bold red tag instigator. Public influence high. That's when I understood. The system didn't want obedience. It wanted invisibility. I wasn't just a man in a wheelchair with a torn uniform. I was a threat because I remembered. Because I spoke. We decided to go public. Franklin held a press conference outside the Greystone PD headquarters. He didn't mince words. We have uncovered what appears to be an illegal watch list targeting veterans, minorities, and citizens who speak against abuse. This is not justice. This is surveillance. This is fear wearing a badge. Reporters swarmed. But something was off. The police chief, a man I'd never met, stepped forward to speak. His name was Henry Brome, white mid-50s with that tired, practiced look of someone who had too many secrets to sleep well. He said the list was a misinterpretation of internal risk assessments. He called it non-operational. But the damage was done. The story broke nationally. Suddenly, I wasn't just Sergeant Holt. I was a symbol. Veterans from all over the country began reaching out. Stories poured in, disabled men, denied rides to VA appointments, women in uniform being followed by off-duty officers, young men arrested for resisting without ever resisting a thing. One letter stood out. It came from a woman named Tasha Wilkins. She was the daughter of Gregory Wilkins, a veteran who died in Greystone custody 3 years ago. She said no one had listened, that he'd been arrested for loitering outside a pharmacy, that officers claimed he fell during booking, but she had proof, security footage, never released. Somehow she got it. Maybe someone slipped it to her. Maybe it was guilt. Doesn't matter. What mattered was what it showed. Gregory Wilkins, cuffed, slumped, a boot pressed to his back, not resisting, not moving, and standing over him, Officer Daniel Kincaid, still in uniform, still smirking. The date 3 years before he tore my uniform. That was the moment I broke. Not from grief, but from clarity. This wasn't about a single incident. This was a sickness. And like in war, when infection spreads, you don't negotiate with it. You cut it out. We took the footage to the state attorney general. This time they listened. Because this time the story was too big to bury. Within 48 hours, a special investigative committee was formed. Officers were placed under suspension. Subpoenas issued. Kincaid was brought back this time not to a courtroom, but a holding cell. They charged him with involuntary manslaughter. The same badge he used to strip others of dignity was now hanging on a courtroom evidence hook. And me, I stood outside the jail, watched him get walked in. He didn't smirk this time. He looked like every man I'd seen just before a firefight, unsure of which direction held death. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was something heavier. Justice, maybe. But justice always comes late, and never without scars. Back home, I sat with Franklin under my porch light. We didn't talk for a while, just listened to the cicadas and the distant sound of kids playing. Life returning. Then I asked him, "You think they'll ever stop?" He shook his head. "No. But now they know we won't either." And in that quiet, with the sky growing dark above a town that once tried to erase me, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace, but power. The kind they can't tear. The kind they'll never again underestimate. It happened on a Thursday. The sky hung low over Greystone, thick with the kind of clouds that pressed down on your lungs like the air itself was waiting for something. They said the hearing would be closed to the public. Said it was routine just procedure for the officer involved in the Wilkins case. But that lie didn't hold. Because the people of this city, of this country, were done being told when to sit, when to speak, when to feel. So they showed up. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. Veterans from every state. Some in wheelchairs. Some on prosthetic legs. Some with service dogs at their side. Some with medals pinned to jackets older than I was when I first enlisted. They came with purpose. They came with anger. But mostly they came with love. Love for a brotherhood. A sisterhood that this city had tried to shame into silence. I sat in front of the courthouse again, same steps, same wheels beneath me. But this time I wasn't alone. Behind me stood Franklin Leeson Nguyen, Tasha Wilkins, and a wall of citizens who had decided their voices mattered more than their fears. There were no chants, no screams, only one phrase printed on signs, stitched on jackets, etched into banners that spanned the entire plaza. This time we watch. Inside the courthouse the air was thicker than the storm clouds. The grand jury sat in silence as the footage played again the final time. Gregory Wilkins lying still, Kincaid looming. Officers walking away. No aid given, no urgency. Just the quiet routine of institutional cruelty. When the lights came up, the prosecutor turned not to the judge but to the people behind her. Victims, survivors, whistleblowers, veterans, and said, "We do not seek vengeance. We seek accountability." Then she turned to the bench. "We request full trial proceedings under public oversight with immediate custody of the defendant." The judge nodded once. Approved. I didn't cheer. No one did. Because justice is not a touchdown. It's a trench. And we were still crawling through it. Outside, as word spread, a wave of breath passed through the crowd. Some clapped. Some wept. A few veterans saluted the flag hoisted above the courthouse, a flag that, for once, didn't feel like a lie. And then the unexpected happened. The chief of police. Henry Brome walked through the crowd alone. He wasn't in uniform. No escorts. Just a man in a black suit face, worn by 1,000 nights of denial. He stepped onto the steps, raised both hands, not in power, but surrender. "I'm resigning," he said into the microphone. The crowd froze. I covered for men who didn't deserve the badge. I silenced complaints. I signed off on that list. I did it in the name of order. But order without honor is just control. And I've lost mine. He pulled something from his pocket, his chief's pin, and laid it on the podium. No one moved, not even the cameras, because we all understood this wasn't scripted. This was a man breaking, and in that break something began to heal. Later that evening, I returned home to find the street lined with candles. I thought maybe it was a memorial. I rolled closer and realized they spelled something. "Thank you, Sarge." A little boy ran up, saluted me with a plastic toy rifle, and said, "You made them listen." I bent forward and whispered, "No, son. We made them listen." That night, Franklin and I sat out back under the stars. I asked him, "You ever think about the ones we left behind?" "All the time," he said. "You think they'd be proud." He didn't answer right away. Then he said softly, "I think they'd finally feel seen." And that was enough. The next morning, I woke to find a small package on my porch. No note, just a box. Inside it, my name patch stitched anew alongside a fresh marine dress blues jacket. Folded perfectly. Pressed, restored, and beneath it a photo of me, surrounded by a sea of salutes. Proof that no uniform once earned with honor can ever be stripped by cowards. Only history decides who we remember, and this time, history would remember us. They tried to take everything, my uniform, my dignity, my silence. But what they couldn't take, what they never understood, was that I wasn't fighting for myself. Not really. I was fighting for every forgotten soldier who came home to a country that saluted them on Monday and ignored them by Tuesday. For every veteran who stared down a barrel overseas and came back to stare down suspicion in his own neighborhood. For every child who watched their parent wear a uniform abroad only to be disrespected in public, in courtrooms and hospitals, and in the very cities they swore to protect. 2 weeks after the resignation of Chief Brome and the indictment of Officer Kincaid, something extraordinary happened. Greystone, Louisiana. This little patch of soil, so drenched in denial, hosted its first ever Veteran Honor March. Not a parade, not a spectacle, a march. Silent, solemn, sacred, and they asked me to lead it. I didn't want to. Not at first. My hands still shook sometimes. My breath still hitched at night when I dreamed of torn fabric and shattered faces. But Franklin looked at me hand on my shoulder and said, "You don't march because you're healed. You march because they need to see you haven't quit." So I did, wearing my new jacket. The one someone had folded with reverence. The one that bore my name again, Sergeant Raymond Holt, this time, stitched in red thread like a wound mended with honor. They lined the streets, thousands of them, not just in Greystone. People drove in from Baton Rouge, Atlanta, Memphis. Even 2 busloads from Chicago. Some held flags, others held photographs. One woman stood with her baby in her arms and tears on her cheeks. She held a sign that simply said, "He never met his grandpa." But today he honors him. We marched past the courthouse, the site of my humiliation and vindication. I stopped briefly, looked up at the steps. Then I raised my right hand and saluted, not for the building, but for the memory of Gregory Wilkins. For every name we never got to say. For every voice that was buried before it could rise. After the march, they held a small ceremony at Veterans Park. They unveiled something. a bronze sculpture. It was of a man in a wheelchair, back straight, eyes forward, one hand on the wheel, the other holding a folded flag in his lap. It was me, but it wasn't just me. It was all of us, engraved beneath it. They can break your body, but they cannot touch your honor. The mayor, newly elected, a black woman named Ava Gaines, stood and read a proclamation. From this day forward, she said, November 12th will be known as Sergeant Holt Day, in honor of his courage, sacrifice, and refusal to be silenced. People clapped, but I wept, not from pride, from relief, because for the first time in my life I believed that maybe, just maybe, the fight had meant something beyond scars and loss. Back home that evening, I rolled out onto my porch. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon in amber and blood-orange light. I held a mug of tea. Lisa Nguyen sat nearby, reading a letter from her students. Each one had drawn a picture of me, saluting, smiling. Franklin joined us, leaning against the porch rail. You did it, he said. No, I replied. We did it. He nodded. Feels good, doesn't it? I looked out at the quiet street, once the site of threats and silence, now lined with flags and flowers. It feels like home, I said. And then, just as the wind shifted, a little boy rode by on his bike. He had a toy helmet on, a cape made from an old flag. He waved as he passed. Thank you, sir. I smiled, heartful, because in that moment I knew we had planted something, not just justice, legacy, a seed of dignity that no badge, no bigotry, no system could uproot. And long after I'm gone, long after the last gavel strikes and the last march fades into memory, some child somewhere will put on a toy helmet, salute the sky, and believe that honor matters, because we made them see it, because we refused to be forgotten, because they tore the uniform, but never the flag. Some uniforms are made of cloth. Others, like mine, are made of memory, sacrifice, and truth. In a world where dignity can be torn in public and silence is mistaken for peace, this story reminds us justice doesn't arrive until someone demands it. And when one voice rises, others will follow. Because the true measure of a nation is how it treats those who can no longer fight yet still stand in spirit for what's right. This wasn't just my story. It was a reckoning and a promise. We are not here to survive in silence. We are here to live with courage, to speak for the unseen, to protect what matters not just with weapons, but with truth, resilience, and love. The meaning of life is not in what we take, but in what we leave behind. And I choose to leave behind a legacy that says they tried to silence me, and I made the whole world listen. If this story moved, you don't scroll away. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful, true-life dramas that honor the unheard and challenge injustice. Comment below. Have you or someone you love ever been overlooked or disrespected despite their service or sacrifice? Let's build a community where courage never goes unnoticed.